I'm delighted to be here with you today. It's a great conference. It's not the first time I'm here, and so I'm really happy to see how this is growing and see so many of you coming. It's a great event, and a big welcome to everybody. I hope you enjoy your 2 days of the conference. I'll be going with you through a journey of how to secure and how not to break PKI-based systems on a use case, standard use case of a user in a more advanced case when there's not only server certificates but also client certificates. So there's a client, a typical use case in UBS that we need also to authenticate him. He needs to authenticate the server, and he wants to sign some transactions with his digital signature. So all the cases which are relevant to those and where attacks are possible. I won't be talking about SSL vulnerabilities and protocol, how to attack the protocol. This happens from time to time and can be monitored. I'll be talking about more relevant things from like perspective of you, potentially building those systems, securing those systems. So I'll be talking a little about the server certificates, the client certificates, the code signing, which is equally important as you want to secure your whole environment, and this plays a role, about the digital signatures, so signing those financial transactions in our case, but this might be something else as well. And I'll be talking about the more practical ways to attack those kind of systems, finishing with some PKA checklist, and there'll be time for questions. So first, quickly about myself and our sponsor. I have more than 10 years building advanced cryptographic solutions, everything from coding the crypto libraries myself that were securing Blu-ray. To this day, they are securing Blu-ray. A lot of applications throughout the world. Building on top of that, various workflow solutions, all crypto relevant, something also you will call a blockchain right now. So I bring a huge experience to UBS, where I have a pleasure to building and leading some delivery structures. We have some great guys, and we're working on some really cool stuff. So to give you a picture of UBS, it's a really great opportunity for me to be in such a big institutions. Just to give you a picture, we have several data centers. We have thousands of servers supporting thousands, almost 100,000 of applications. This all needs to be secured, but at the same time, we want to be very swift. We want to make sure that developers, when they do their solutions, that they can be put to productions as quick as possible. So we try to make this journey possible from the credentials perspective, where we are managing the credential lifecycle and delivering solutions in this scope. So with such big infrastructure, we have everything in UBS, and it's really amazing to be able to work in such a company and have, I don't know if there's any other company like that you have those type of challenges, that the infrastructure is so big, so many platforms. So I really enjoy this. We have millions of credentials, and this has to happen quickly. It has to happen securely. We need to be able to rotate the credentials very fast. So we're doing really cool stuff there to make this happen, including some of the latest, which is compliance as code. So when developers want to make their solution happen, it's enough that they use our stuff, and then they're compliant, they know they're secure, we are the experts, they don't have to worry, then they have to go through tedious processes of releasing application in this very highly secure environments if they use the solutions that we're building and providing to the whole UBS. So just quickly, some areas in security which are hot topics right now. We do use artificial intelligence. It's coming basically everywhere, including threat detection. We have some really cool proactive security hardening. We do data protections everywhere. We have very highly sensitive data of our clients that we cannot be named, and we want to protect their channels and all the data in transit and at rest. A lot of cool stuff in biometric and of course the cloud and automating the whole things with lots of robotics initiative all around. So now to the topic. So why even why PKI is important and what attack vectors are possible through PKI and to the PKI, how to attack it. So it's a golden standard for authentication, non-repudiation, in integrity. It right now secures probably most of the protocols that are used every day from emails, web, software distributions. It's replacing traditional signatures as all institutions want to be digital and be able to provide this way of making transactions to our customers, to everybody. So I'll be talking about some cases. Like the first thing you think about PKI is, oh, I have to protect the private key, but there's much more to it. PKI is not only the private key, and there's much more to think about, and also there's much more easier ways to attack it than trying to steal the private key. But this is the important part, so I'll be focusing first on this, as this is a very very big target for hackers all around the world to try to get access to the CA or the server's private key. So what may happen, right? So if somebody compromises the private key, gets access to it, first of all, the reputation of the company may be damaged. Imagine like the front page of such a big enterprise which is being hacked or displays something else. It would be a huge reputational damage. There's trade secrets, CID, so it's client identification, client data is something which is sacred for us. We have clients, we're managing portfolios, some of the richest people in the world. To be the client of UBS, you have to have $5 million in free cash. So not invested in free cash to even be a client. So we really treat this data secret with all the segregation of duties and all the security principles. So we keep this information secret. We keep our trade information secret. It obviously can influence world markets if some information about the moves we will make would leak. There's personal information of our clients and also employees. Of course, there's a lot of transactions. The amount of money which is going through our system is tremendous. So we want to secure that, our resources, and sometimes it's also human life. So the standard case, as everybody knows it, and I'll be building on that and going with you through the journey, is a server certificate when you want to secure basically your website. So how this happens in PKI, as you well know, you have the root CA usually. It's somewhere offline in a bunker. There's no online access to it, and there are certificates there which are valid for many years. They're only used to issue the intermediate CA, and then the intermediate CAs are issued for particular protocols, like for example SHA-2, for particular use cases, like for example code signing or securing servers. So you have the structure, and in the end you have your certificate, which is to be trusted. The root certificate must be distributed to your environment, and this happens through the OS and through the browsers, depending on the combination of OS browser. It's a combination of the OS delivering those trust answers to you together with the browser. So you have it in your browser, and then when you finally receive the certificate as shown on the bottom in your browser, the whole chain is verified up to the top. You see that, okay, the top certificate is in my trust chain. Okay, I trust it. I do this green bar, so inform the user that he can proceed, that this is trusted. But now in more detail, how this works. So to get a certificate, and I'll be going through all those places, how to potentially attack them, and how important it is to protect them, to show you how difficult it is, and how many points and vectors of attack are possible and were made in the last decade and more. So first of all, there's a registration authority which has the obligation of verifying who you are. So if the certificate is to you, then that you're who you present. Or if the certificate is to some domain, verifying that you have the ownership of the domain, giving this OK stamp of acceptance, and sending the message to the real CA. OK, this was verified. Issue the certificate. Hence the left certificate goes to you. You can install it next to your private key and use it to secure your server, send the certificate to any client that connects to you. Equally important is validation. So there's a validation authority. Usually is the same thing. You can think of it. It might be as simple as providing the CRL, meaning revocations list, and a CSP protocol. So you want to make sure that those certificates, if they're valid, for example, for 2 years, there might be a situation where something happened, it got revoked. You want to check that the certificate is still valid before you really trust this. So that's basically the whole PKI and infrastructure in one picture. Now let's have a look how we can try to attack it. So the first thought is, okay, still the private key, and this happens a lot. If you observe the CRLs which are issued, this happens on like hundreds of thousand cases where this happens. This has to be monitored. Hence, very important for everybody to monitor, audit the servers to first of all detect an incident. Like nobody, I hope, assumes that their servers are secure. And always will be. You want to be able to detect an incident and be ready to react to whatever the incident means. So that first detect and then react to the incident. So this happens. It's usually hard in most of the really relevant cases. This private key is stored on some HSM in some hardware. You really cannot gain access to get a copy of the private key. There might be some other ways of just trying to get the use of the private key, which may allow you to do some things, but very hard to get the private key itself. And of course, or more security relevant cases where this key is stored in some file. This file should be protected, and it happens that this file is compromised, it leaks, maybe because it was transferred to some other places, maybe to some load balancers or some monitoring infrastructure to peek inside the packets to see what's happening there. This key might be in multiple of places. Maybe it was the management structure of delivering the key in place wasn't really done so. Maybe it's somewhere in the distribution package. Maybe the whole process is not done right, and there are multiple points of attack to actually steal such a key which lives in a file. Moving forward, there were cases where, and even with Microsoft, for example, somebody pretended to be a Microsoft employee, and the registration authority trusted and issued the certificate. So always remember that usually the technology behind security is good enough, but there's always people in it. And in such a complex system like here, there are multiple attack vectors that involve social techniques and people and mistakes, and usually mistakes in management of the infrastructure. So even if there's some nice policies writing, okay, this is our practice statement, they are not followed and allow for things to happen. So this is one possible attack, pretending to be the company. Then something that also happens is to be able to somehow either with collaboration or by hacking the infrastructure, the systems, get hold of the registration authority, which sometimes is not the same thing as CA, sometimes it's something external, sometimes this is partners. So for those big companies that sell certificates, it's often partners that act as registration authorities. And it happened that they got hacked and some certificates were issued that allow to pretend to be the legitimate site. Moving forward, sometimes it also happened in the past that the credentials used by this registration authority got stolen, and somebody was able to connect to the CA infrastructure and then issue whatever he wanted. So all this leaves some trails. So it's usually detected and usually quite fast, but not always. The ultimate thing you dream of as a hacker is to somehow get hold of the CA itself and compromise it, because then if you're inside the CA, you can cover your tracks, you can cover the logs, and then it's really might be really hard to determine what certificates were really issued, which should be revoked, and then it ends up with revoking the whole tree, which happened, for example, with some Nordic company which also served government, so a big issue. Everybody had to rotate their certificates. It was a huge damage to not only the company that provided the certificates, but also to those that had to manage the incident in the end. Then, if the CA is using some old algorithms, let's say MD5, it's been shown that there are collision attacks, and it's possible now to like forge a certificate. So you don't have access to the private key, but just by doing the collision attack, you're able to forge a key which would look like a real one. And then the validation data. Maybe the certificate, maybe the incident got detected, maybe the certificate got revoked, but maybe you're able to suppress, for example, the validation data. So, for example, made the CRL not available in this validation environment where it will be checked. Maybe you can reply the CSP, like the previous one, which is still valid, but which says that the certificate is valid. Multiple attacks that can happen in this place. So quite complex system. Very crucial that if there are practice statements, policies that they're followed, that the personnel handling this is trained, and it's really not always the case, because this is a great business model. Like, how much resources do you need really to like make another $5 and get a certificate, right? It's infrastructure is in the place, and it happens that there's so many CAs in the world that are trusted that sometimes the security aspect really lacks because of the great business model that wants to scale and issue as many certificates and as fast as possible to basically earn money for those companies. One additional attack which is possible is modifying trust. If you're already in the system, it's really done, right? So you can do anything. You can display something different to the user. You can trick him to trust your service. You can modify trust. This is done. So what did we gain, or what did the attacker gain by getting access to a key which pretends to be your company? He, first of all, and these are multiple scenarios depending on what's the motivation of the attacker. It might be a nation state that basically wants to eavesdrop on the whole nation. Maybe there's some protest, and it happened, and quite frequently, that where there were protests, for example, China issued some certificate authority controlled by China issued a wildcard certificate, if I remember right, that allowed to eavesdrop on, like, for example, Microsoft, Google, whatever you want, connections from people to the server. It's enough. So you're the least privileged attacker. You just can eavesdrop on the encrypted communication, and even that, depending on the scenario, if you got the private key, this will allow you to eavesdrop, or do the standard man-in-the-middle attack, and then you see everything, and you can also modify whatever happens. But this is also sometimes, so these are some nation states scenarios. There are other scenarios when you basically use PKI as an attack vector itself, because once you have the private certificate, you're able then to try to launch some other types of attacks and then get your ultimate goal of getting access to some data, control of the infrastructure, the points that I was talking about before. So now we were talking about the servers, but now the user. So this is not for average user. This is not a standard case, but it is for us. So you also want to have authentication of the client, so have the mutual TLS. It's basically the same process. Somebody has to verify who you are, issue the certificate, and all the attacked vectors I talked before apply here equally. What's maybe nice to mention here is, and to be aware of that, this allows to not only act as the client itself and do whatever he can, but this gives an attacker some really nice abilities to try to hide from monitoring software, because if attacker has a trusted certificate and key and can log into your systems through an encrypted tunnel, maybe your infrastructure is not really monitoring that. So maybe if he has this encrypted tunnel to your server, he will be able, if there's, for example, end-to-end encryption, he will be able to launch standard SQL injection or other attacks on your server that will evade detection. An interesting case how to leverage attacking PKI to launch other attacks. And code signing, this is the hacker's dream come true, right? To be able to have assigned software that would evade your systems measures, your antivirus measures. And it's been shown that the infamous Stuxnet, where the drivers were signed by a trusted signing certificate, many other cases where basically hacker, once he already either tricks somebody into installing some software, which the system will show that this is trusted, so it will evade the mechanisms of detection of the operating system. Then there was some research showing how this can be also used to evade detection of antivirus software. I think they ramped up and are a bit better now, but a few years back it was possible, for example, to evade antivirus scanning just by copying the signature. And then, because of optimization of how antivirus software works, if the antivirus software saw that, okay, there's a signature, not verifying it at all, okay, let's keep it. This probably is trusted, and this was it was possible to evade, if I remember right, 80% of antivirus software at that time. So hopefully this is better now. And what's important to note is, again, the whole procedures around maintaining such infrastructure are not really done well, and I believe it's just getting worse. As a result, research shows that 80% of such abusive certificates that were used for co-signing can be still leveraged for up to 6 years, which only shows how people are lagging in applying the right practices, updating their revocation list, and so on and so on. And now when we are talking about the channel, and now we had one certificate to authenticate. Obviously, we have another one to do signing. You cannot use one certificate and private key for both. So now we have the client authenticated, and he wants to sign some transaction, maybe multi-million-dollar transaction that he wants to invest in some stock or other things he like to ask us to do. So he has his private key, he has the public key of the recipient, he encrypts the message which is sent. That's, I believe, well understood to you how this works, but I wanted to talk about some more. This is not usual attack vectors. This is, at least nobody really admits that this happens, but it's not reported, but it's still a valid attack point. I haven't found references saying that this happens, but I think it's a very valid use case, and I'm sure somebody is trying to make those kind of things happen. And what's interesting when you have a digital signature is that it's important to be sure what is the part of data that is being signed, and that this data cannot be changed. So for example, if you're signing a Word document, and the client is shown a Word document, some transaction, okay, I sign it, and is sent to the server, but maybe there was some dynamic content, JavaScript or other, in this format that would allow it, and meaning that a different result will render to the person signing it, and a different to maybe a person who is later viewing this for execution or system. Some even more important and or interesting cases are that there are ways to trick one file to be both. So you can have one file, for example, a PDF and TIFF, that will, depending on which extension you will add to it, will open a completely different valid document. And this is made possible because, for example, PDF just requires that the header of the PDF is somewhere in the first, if I remember, 1000 bytes or something like that. So you can have a TIFF file, which is also a PDF file, rendering completely different thing to the person who's viewing it, just by tricking it to open in a different software or just modifying the extension. So ultimately, and this is one point which evades almost always, is that we kind of forget that in the end we are making all those transactions on a very insecure devices, right? The devices we use usually are not really secure. What is shown on the screen cannot be guaranteed to be really what is intended. Another part important specifically to digital signatures is not to break it. And I saw in my professional career enormous amount of times when, for example, XML signatures were broke just because the people that made some systems further in the pipeline weren't aware of how to treat signed documents, and the signature was damaged in transit, in storage, or by including it in some bigger structure. So this all has to be taken into account. People usually don't understand that even if they add one white space, that this breaks the signature, right? And then you have some crazy conversations trying to explain why this matters. So be aware of the signed parts, that they cannot change. And even more important is with signatures that you want to be, you have the signature. If everything works, this is fine, but in the end, you want it and you keep it in case of some dispute. So the client comes, or maybe there's a bank-to-bank transaction, and says that I didn't make this order, right? I didn't take the loan for 5 million, and I don't have to give you the money back, right? Or whatever that might be. Or one bank, which is cases I work with frequently, sending a transaction to another bank to buy some stock, sell some stock, and you want to make sure, right, the receiving want to make sure it came from the right person, and then the person sending cannot refute that this was sent by him. So this is it's very important to be able to have access to all the validation data needed to prove, in case of dispute, that this really is a valid transaction. So you have to store, for example, CRLs or CSPs, depending on how complicated the use case is. If in the use of advanced signatures, it may be much more. And this is important in case of long signatures. So maybe the signature was valid when you received it, but maybe next day the signature of the certificate of the user got hacked. So if you didn't collect the evidence at the time of receiving the certificate and secured it, you won't have possibility to really prove that the signature is valid, because the key was compromised. Or maybe 1 month later, simply the certificate expired, in a very simple case again. But if you didn't collect the evidence, you cannot prove, in case of dispute, that it was really the person. Or the sub-CA gets compromised, or the whole algorithm gets compromised because there's some new mathematical breakthroughs, or simply in computer speed that allow to make attacks that were before unfeasible. And there are ways to protect from all of that by actively maintaining the signatures in something that you might now call a blockchain of trust, basically resigning the evidence you have with newer, stronger, better algorithms, actively maintaining it, having multiple sources of this trust and building this blockchain of trust, you're able actually to even prove 100 years from now that such a signature was valid, which is important where we go in the digital and we want clients to be able to make those long-term transactions with through electronic means. This is then becoming really important. Consequences are obvious if an attacker can forge by either access to the private key or by being able to manipulate the document or other means, be able to trick the system. He can make someone or the system do something that was not intended. In all the thing I was talking before, so the signers can deny that it was them signing document if the whole infrastructure is mismanaged. Other cases where signatures are used for integrity of logs, again, to either be able to audit or prove in case of dispute, can be compromised. So a lot of consequences that may happen. And now about more practical types of attacks. So everybody thinks about the private key and gaining access or gaining access to, at least to the usage of private key. For example, if there's an HSM, maybe it's not really important that you get the copy of the private key if you're able to control the signing device and make it sign whatever you want. But this is usually really hard. It's protected, as I said before, in some HSMs. So there's a much easier use case, which is, as research shows, used in more than 60% of cases. And this just makes two steps. Download whatever free software to generate a certificate, issue it in 1 minute, and then modify the trust. Either whoever is you are attacking, the server or client, modify the trust. And it so happens that usually everybody being pushed by business and so on, they always are concerned about making the application work. And when it works, they're happy. And somehow it slips that the validation environment is equally important. It's not a privacy issue. You don't have to protect the trust store as the private key, but you have to protect its integrity. And this somehow escapes. And as a result, in more than 60% of cases, this is the main vector of attack. Just modify trust store, and then you evade all this infrastructure. You're just using a simple key you generated in a minute with some free software on some cheap computer of yours, if you're able to modify the trust. And again, much easier ways than trying to get access to the private key are possible. Sometimes it's possible to, again, attack the validation environment, which usually doesn't have such protection as the signing environment. Maybe you're able to substitute the data which is being validated, or in some other way attack the application validation components there to conclude the opposite result, right? Just make the flip, right? Because that happens. Or as was saying before, try to attack through the validation by replying OCSP that was valid maybe 1 minute ago. Maybe it's still within its expiration, and you can try to leverage that. And obviously at hidden code, right, to the software or validation environment. So a lot of much easier usually cases than attacking the private key, which has all the controls. In our bank, for example, private key has like the most secret level of protection, right? You don't want to attack that. Some checklists. I'm starting to finish my examples. So make sure that your private key material is secret, but also remember about the integrity of the trust and the validation environment, and of course review code. Sometimes it might be some malicious action by some internal people, and it's usually it very often is that it's some internal employees, maybe of revenge or something else, putting something in the code. I did so myself, things in the code that were done even not intentionally, but some things that needs to be. This is something that needs to be checked. And for the digital signature case, it's really important to know what the signature is signing and what's the meaning of the data which is being signed. So if there's no dynamic content, can it be changed somehow, substituted, or that this double meaning formats being used? And then there are all dispute cases. So we want to make sure that the signature is not damaged in storage. And is simply available to you when needed, and equally you have the access to all the validation data needed for verifying it. And they're really nice. I enjoy those cases enormously with long-term advanced signatures which require this blockchain of trust. You really might want to make sure that you do that if you expect or want to be able to validate the signature even a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now. Very, very important. Any questions? Feel free to come to me after the presentation. I'll be happy to speak with any of you. Thank you for participating. Please visit our booth at UBS. We have some cool stuff for you, and enjoy the conference.